I'm Michelle Graves, your host on today's segment of The Power of Money. I'm glad to have you here. Now, at The Power of Money, we are interested in three things happening. First, we want you to get the necessary education so that you and your family can make the decisions that will impact positively on you in your financial life. The second thing is that you be empowered to prosper. I only want the best for you. And you can only get that if you have education and then the drive to make it happen. And the third thing that is so important to me is that you recognize that life is more than a journey and that you be energized so that you can begin to participate in the truly joyous experience of living. So here's to empowerment, here's to education, and here's to energy. I'm Michelle Graves, your host, Power of Money, and here we go. And here we go on today's segment of The Power of Money, a continuation of my conversation with Attorney Michael J. Millonig, who is a elder law attorney, credentialed board member of the Elder Law Foundation, and has been involved in working with families for well over 2+ decades. Knows his stuff, and I have him on because he knows his stuff, okay? I had him on a couple of years ago to talk about nursing homes and how to protect your assets from seizure, and that particular show got very, very high marks on YouTube with the number of people watching it and visiting it all over the country. We are currently in 54 markets, as well as YouTube and Facebook, and I wanted to revisit that subject matter because things have changed, and he is the expert. I'm not going to try to talk to you about something I don't know. So I brought you the man that does know to revisit this whole subject matter and see what you need to do to protect yourself and your family from the devastation that is caused from nursing homes. And the fact that well, let me change the terminology because we're now calling them skilled care facilities, where people are looking for a higher level of attention to their conditions. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I am going to say this, and hear me well, financial advisors, investment advisors, insurance agents, etc., etc. It doesn't matter how much money they accumulate if things are not put in place to make sure they don't lose it all. And it doesn't matter how much they have in assets if you don't understand how the rules operate. And I say that because I had a conversation with an associate of mine, sobering conversation I might add, about this entire thing and why I felt the number one priority of all advisors for seniors and people that are at that age is to be in a position to ensure that they don't lose all of their money. I mean, right, all of it. And it's nice to talk about it as a conversation, but it is not so nice to talk about it as an operational reality. And so we're going to talk to Mr. Millonig and get his perspective. And I do pray that all of you sit down. Don't multitask on this. Sit down and listen to what he has to say. I'm going to let him do most of the talking because he's the expert. I know enough to be dangerous, but he's the expert. So welcome back again.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Thanks.
Where do we want to begin?
Well, I guess maybe let's talk about just kind of some definitions. So,
Okay.
I mean, you kind of brought up a level of care. So when I say nursing home, I usually mean what we call skilled care.
Okay.
So that's the highest level of care. Then there's assisted living.
Right.
That's a lower level of care. You don't need as much nursing care.
Right.
So again, today when I say nursing home, I'm talking about skilled care.
Okay.
And then of course, so we have assisted living. Then of course there can be independent living. Some
Right.
places have just independent living for seniors. So,
Right,
yeah.
okay. But your area we're going to talk about is skilled care or nursing home.
Yeah, well, a little bit of assisted living as well.
Okay.
And then our concern is people that need long-term care, not as opposed to someone who maybe someone who has a medical condition and they need medical care, and they might need maybe a limited time in nursing home, and then they go home.
Right.
So we're talking about people with chronic conditions, dementia or something like that, where they're in there permanently. So
Yes.
that's our concern.
Yes.
Because if you're just in for a month, that's different in terms of being there for years and years.
Yes, it is.
Right.
And the reality is that the numbers are staggering. Absolutely staggering because of the baby boomers. We're coming in and we've got that Pepsi lifestyle. Man alive, that Pepsi lifestyle gotcha. So now you got all kinds of things going on, as well as Alzheimer being epidemic.
Right.
And diabetes, heart conditions. All of these things play right into what you talk about.
Yeah, what you might need long-term care. And we should really start off by saying, first of all, now a lot of people, once you're 65, you end up being on Medicare.
Right.
You probably have a Medicare supplement, which picks up a lot of things not covered.
Right.
But one of the things that isn't covered at all is long-term care in a nursing home. So
People do not believe it.
I know people that, well, they just make assumptions. So now there's limited coverage. So if you go to a hospital and you've been admitted and you're there for 3 days,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
you go to a nursing home and you're getting some type of rehab therapy,
Right.
you can get some limited coverage. You might get 20 days in full covered by Medicare.
Medicare.
And possibly you could still get coverage from day 21 through 100, but there's a copay.
Yes,
And
there is.
Not many people get that full 100 days, but in the long term, which is what we're worried about, beyond 100 days, that's definitely it.
And you do have to show, correct me if I'm wrong, improvement.
Well, that's a little bit of a controversial matter, but in general, the law used to be, and in practice still is, you have to be getting some rehab therapy and improving, and at some point, you level off,
Right.
and then Medicare is cut off. That's actually been challenged in court.
Really?
And it's actually been quite a few years now. The CMS, the Federal Medicaid Care Agency,
right.
said is not allowed to use the improvement standard, but it still really hasn't been implemented. So
Right.
as a practical matter, what we just said about improvement is still, at least around in this area, and I think pretty much around the country, is still the standard. So, but the point is, beyond 100 days, definitely it's your private pay.
Right.
Unless, of course, you have your own nursing home insurance.
Right.
And that's the first thing I suggest people do. If you're planning ahead, think about getting long-term care insurance, and you know a little bit more about that because
Yeah,
you sell it.
yeah.
But I tell people I don't sell long-term care insurance, but I'd like to sell you on at least looking into it.
Right.
And when I tell people, again, I try not to say too much. I leave it to the agents, but I say, look, it's like buying a car. You can get a $30,000 car or a $100,000 car. Get the best you can afford.
Right.
And there's different parameters. You could maybe talk a little bit more about that. I mean, the main thing is, how much does it pay a day? Does it
Right.
pay 200 a day
Right.
or 300 a day?
Right.
Does it pay for 2 years or 3 years?
Right.
That obviously affects the premium.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I'm not going to cut my tongue on this because I've been certified to as an agent for long-term care products for almost 15 years now. And the industry has changed. Insurance companies took a whooping because they had to pay out so much money for this benefit. And so what Attorney Millonig is saying is, you need it first. That's not an option. You're going to need it. It's just aging. And the second thing is that it's expensive. But you know what is really expensive? When you don't have it, and it's got to come out of your pocket. and after you've run through all your money, and you now are eligible for Medicaid, can you imagine? You've worked your whole life, you've accumulated, only to see everything just wither away. But that's my opinion, but that's also the truth. It's vital that you look into this for yourself. Those of you that are over 50, come on now, step to the table, bite the bullet, and just get the coverage, because you're going to need it. Okay?
Let me say two other kind of preliminary things. First of all, about assisted living. Most states have always covered assisted living in their Medicaid program. Ohio's been a little bit behind the curve on this. For the last, I think it's 15 years or so now, we do have what's called the assisted living waiver program, so that now assisted living is covered by Medicaid, but, excuse me, the facility has to be Medicaid certified.
The facility,
and
yeah.
At least in the Dayton, Ohio area, that's still a minority of the assisted living places.
Okay.
Now, and again, this varies a lot around the country. And again, in the Dayton, Ohio area, every nursing home, skilled nursing home, is Medicaid certified except for one. So,
Okay.
so it's not unusual.
So for the skilled,
Yeah.
but what about the assisted?
Well, again, that's a minority.
Okay.
But again, and we'll talk about the rules in a little bit, but and the rules are basically the same.
Okay.
But you have to make sure you're there at a facility which is covered. And a couple problems are, let's say, obviously assisted living is cheaper. So
Yeah.
if you or a family member goes into assisted living facility and that's appropriate for you, well, that's good. But what if you're in there for a couple of years and you run out of money? Well, if you're in a place that's Medicaid certified, you'd be in good shape because you could stay there. If you're not, then the problem is you have to move.
Right.
And what traditionally happens and still does, if you're in a place that has the different levels of care, they'll tend to just move you up into the full skilled care, whether that's appropriate or not. But you want to think ahead, and it's advantageous to be somewhere that's Medicaid certified, obviously.
Right.
So,
and to ask that question while you are doing your search mission and looking at facilities, viewers, that's a critical question to ask. And if they're not, then you need to look elsewhere. Wouldn't that be a fair statement?
Sure. And,
okay.
and if you're at a place that has different levels of care, independent, assisted, and full skilled care, so if you're already there in their assisted living, so you've already been a customer, they know you,
Right.
so you're better off at a place like that, or at least that's an advantage.
I think it is. I think it is. I think most people are not prepared. This has been my observation over the years, because it has already been forecast 20 years ago that 10,000 baby boomers a day were coming out of the system. They were retiring. They were throwing in the towel and saying, I'm out. But what was not anticipated was, after a couple of years of being retired, you begin to have health issues that don't get any better.
Right.
And my goodness gracious, there you are. You don't have the resources to just private pay forever.
Right.
You don't. And I don't care how wealthy you are. It's expensive.
Well, and let's talk about that. So around this area, skilled nursing is anywhere from 90 to 140,000 a year.
My
So
goodness gracious.
It's expensive. And people, when I have people that are looking at insurance, they go, oh my gosh, the premiums are 5,000, 7,000 a year. Well, if
Nothing.
you need it, you'll get that back
You'll
pretty
get
quickly.
it back, yeah.
Now,
And don't talk
yeah.
about Alzheimer, because I know in my part of the neck of the woods, those memory loss facilities are $12,000 a month.
Sure.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
memory loss.
Yeah.
Can a person afford to be sick?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Can you afford to be sick?
Yeah, I know. And before I forget, let me say some things about veterans too.
Okay, please
because,
do.
If you're a veteran, and you probably know you can get full free medical care at a VA facility.
Yeah, you can.
And that's fine. But what some people assume is you're going to get free nursing home care, and that is just simply not true. The only exception to that is if you have a service-connected disability of 70% or more, then you can get free nursing home care regardless of your financial situation. But in general, you don't. So as a veteran, don't assume you're going to get free nursing home care.
So just to repeat, it would have to be for a veteran to qualify for skilled care or nursing home care, it has to be related. It has to be military.
They have to have a 70% or more service-connected disability.
Okay, 70% service-connected disability.
Right. And most veterans, if they have that, they would know that.
Okay,
So, yeah.
okay.
I also want to say a little bit about what's called the VA aid and attendance benefit.
Oh,
Because there's been a lot of talk about that in the last 10 years or so. So if you're a veteran and you served honorably discharged, and you served during wartime, there's this extra benefit. And if you qualify for it, it can be about $2,100 a month at
It's
most.
attractive.
So it's helpful. And there's different, again, levels of care. First of all, there's a homebound benefit. Without getting into too many details, I can just tell you that's very hard to get. I've known people who thought could get it, but you have to literally be homebound. If you're at an assisted living level, I find it's very helpful there to get that extra $2,000 or so a month.
I think so.
But I guess the thing I want to emphasize is, and what I've seen people do is people kind of focus on getting this veterans benefit. And so they go set up an irrevocable trust or they gift money. They do some type of strategy
No way.
which might work for your veterans benefit. But then what happens is, then 2 years later, now you're going to apply for Medicaid, and whatever you did violated Medicaid rules, and now you got a problem. So I really started planning this area mostly to warn people of that. And so if we do planning for the VA benefit, that's fine. We have to coordinate with possibly Medicaid in the future.
And that's going to be a challenge.
And by the way, the VA changed their rules last fall, October of 2018. I forget the exact date, but it was approximately then. It used to be, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, Medicaid has a rule if you give away money, you're going to be ineligible, which makes sense. But the VA, believe it or not, didn't have that rule, which was really kind of a classic loophole. I hate to use that term, but it really was.
Yeah.
So, and we knew they were going to change that. So last fall they did. So now the VA does have a rule that if you're giving away money, there's going to be a penalty period. So don't think you can do that now.
Okay. Well, that changes a lot, doesn't it, in terms of the necessity of setting up irrevocable trusts at the point that you cannot use that as a vehicle to protect assets.
Right, and that's what people used to do. And again, it's fine if you coordinate with Medicaid and are thinking about both things at the same time. But my experience was people are coming in having done that, and they're coming in to me and saying, well, we need to apply for Medicaid. And I'll say, well, that's fine, but this trust wasn't drafted for Medicaid. So,
Right. So tell our viewers, what is Medicaid and why are we?
So let's talk about kind of the basics of Medicaid.
Okay.
So Medicaid, first of all, pays overall, if you look at the budgets of the nursing homes, it pays half of their bills. So it's not unusual. Again, especially I know in Ohio or really in most of the country. The average person, I've read this statistic before, that average person goes into the nursing home, they're on Medicaid 6 months later.
Yes. Yes.
Now, and I should qualify this too, the Medicaid's different in every state. It's kind of an odd system. Now, think about Social Security. That's a federal program. It's run by a federal agency. But Medicaid it's a joint federal and state program. So we have federal rules and regulations which Congress passes, and there's a federal agency. But each state actually administers the program and runs it. There's some areas where the states are allowed to make changes, and then there's other areas where maybe they're not allowed to make changes, but because they're running the program, they interpret things and do things differently.
Right.
So the bottom line is Medicaid is different in every state. So I'm pretty much going to talk about Ohio. I can't talk about 50 states.
I know, that's overbearing.
So the basic rules are, first of all, for a married couple, you got to understand that they look at everything you both own together. So if a husband goes to the nursing home, it doesn't matter if everything's in the wife's name. It's all
Right.
considered joint property.
Yeah, joint property.
And then the
That's
basic
point number one.
right. And then the basic rules are, again, I'm generally going to say Ohio's rules, and they're pretty similar in other states, but just be aware they might be a little different. You have to spend down below $2,000.
Period.
So that's
Tell
rule
them
number
what that
one.
means.
So
Tell them what
so-
that means.
Well, it means all your
Yeah, everything.
cash, investments, cars, and everything has to be below 2,000. Now, there's a lot of exceptions, so we'll kind of get to that. But that's rule number one. So if you're a single person, to make it simple, you got to get everything below 2,000.
Yeah.
Now, there are exemptions. So if you're married, the home is exempt. So if the spouse is still living there, we call that person the community spouse. Then the house is exempt. You're not going to have to kick out of your house. One car is exempt. You're allowed to have one car. And then you can have a prepaid funeral plan if it's an irrevocable plan. So there's there's kind of a lot of other exceptions and rules. But the bottom line is you have to spend down. And spend down is kind of a euphemism for losing what you saved.
Losing all your money.
Sure. And when you say all your money too, kind of makes me think, why do people want to protect their estate? First of all, they want to protect it for their spouse.
Right.
That's always most
Right.
important for people.
Right.
Here's someone at home, and they're most likely retired. They're not working, and whatever money they can save, they
Good for
want.
them, yeah.
Secondary thing is some people do want to pass money on to their children. If any professional does estate planning knows that people want to do it. And I've had many clients where their children were financially better off than them, but for some it still was important to them to do that. So
Right.
sure.
Right. Just the legacy
right.
of the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean that's just what people want to do.
Right.
So let me think about some other rules. So we talked about prepaid funeral plan. We talked
Right.
about one car.
And it has to be an irrevocable contract.
An irrevocable prepaid funeral plan.
Yes.
And the funeral homes understand that.
Okay.
So yeah. And the very important, what's called the community spouse resource allowance. So the spouse at home is allowed to keep half of all the assets valued as of that first day you go in the nursing home. So if you watch the stock market, it's going up and down every day, and your bank balance does too. So if someone goes in the nursing home, for example, September 1st, 2018, we do what we call a snapshot. We add that up, and we take half of that, and that's what the spouse is allowed to keep.
Right.
Now there's a maximum, there's a lid on that, so and that gets adjusted for inflation every year. This year the maximum is approximately $126,000.
Okay. Remember that $126,000, $2,000 spend down. These are all important measuring sticks that
Right.
are part of the plan.
So for example, if a married couple has $300,000, half of that's $150,000. Well, you
Right.
don't get to keep the $150,000.
Right.
You're above the maximum of again approximately $126,000. And by the way, some of these figures are on my website. I do try to keep
Give
them
that
up to
again.
date. It's www.michaelmillonig.com.
Okay.
I have a page with some of these numbers on it.
And I think it's worth them doing the numbers. I really do think people need to do the numbers.
Yeah, sure.
And they'll understand why
Yeah.
this is such
Oh,
an
sure.
important
Well,
issue.
and the number you need to do is you just think, okay, if my spouse is in the nursing home, can I afford to write a check for $10,000 every month? What's going to happen?
Yes, what is going to happen?
And I hate to say, but I talk to people about planning, and a lot of times they come in when someone's starting to have problems or still at home, or they might even go to a nursing home and they think they're going to come back. Some people kind of don't get it until they get that first bill from the nursing home.
Right, shock.
But, and it is
Shock.
a shock to
It
get
is
a
a
bill.
shock.
And some of these nursing homes are kind of slow getting their billing out. I
Right.
don't understand why, because they'll get a bill out for 2 or 3 months, and you got a $25,000 bill.
I've had that conversation with people, which is what happened. I said, they're slow.
I know.
But you better not be slow.
Yeah, yeah.
You better
Sure.
pay them.
Yeah.
So that's an issue.
Yeah. Another issue too, I think men especially kind of tend to be stubborn, or a lot of us think, well, I'm not going to go to nursing home. and we think we're going to be in control of that and say, I don't want to go. I can tell you, almost nobody that's in a nursing home went in there voluntarily.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, people have a stroke or something, and you're just, you're in the hospital, and then, and before you know it, you're in a nursing home. And you don't want to do that, but I'd say it too, but sometimes that's best. I know everyone wants to stay home. I understand that.
Right.
And I know a spouse or someone, they're caring for someone at home for years maybe.
Right.
And they anguish over the decision, and that's a personal decision, so I don't really tell people what to do.
Right.
But what I've noticed from experience is that spouse will go to the nursing home, and then their spouse can come and visit them every day.
Right.
And they can stay there all day if they want.
Right.
But they got people helping them, and they can go home and get a good night's sleep.
Right.
And I mean, that's why we have nursing homes. So.
And I think there's extreme value, and I'm going to talk with those of you listening carefully and directly. If you are married to a person who is sick all the time and cannot do better, and before you say that's not the case, if a person has heart problems, or if a person has had a stroke, or if a person has, God forbid, Alzheimer, and that's real, or they're not able to wash themselves as a result of these conditions, or they're not able to eat the way you eat, or to maneuver, you're gonna need help. And so many seniors and older people refuse to face that truth, which is, I can do this. No, you can't. I am so serious. It is just beyond conversation. So here we go, Mike.
Yeah, it is a big strain on the caregiver, and again, I understand everyone wants to stay home, and I don't ever don't tell people what to do. Another thing you need to realize of course, some people start getting home care.
Right.
If you have someone's Alzheimer's and they need 24/7 care,
right.
The people that come in who aren't nurses, they're just basically caregivers. They're going to be $20 an hour.
Oh, they definitely.
You multiply that out.
Are.
Get your calculator out, multiply it out, and it's going to be more than a nursing home.
Yeah.
So.
But again, I think with so many individuals out here today, it's a reality check, which is, wait a minute, I worked all my life to accumulate these resources, and now I'm watching everything due to health. The joker's wild. Yes. Due to health, go to this end.
Sure. Let's talk about the transfer rule, because that's the most common question I get asked is, what if, well, gee, can't I just give money away?
Yeah, they do.
Now, first of all, a lot of people don't want to give money away to their kids or whoever, but so I mentioned, if the basic rule is you have to spend down below $2,000.
Right.
So you don't have to be real smart to think, well, I'll give it away. Well, the government's not stupid, so they have a rule that says if you give money away, you're going to be penalized and not eligible. So let me explain that a little bit. So first of all, they look back. If you apply for Medicaid, they look back 5 years to see if you've made any gifts, and they're going to. First of all, you have an obligation to disclose that.
Right.
They're also going to review all your bank statements, and they can ask for 5 years worth of bank and other financial statements. So they're going to look through it, and I can tell you, they do many times. If they see $10,000 or something, they're going to say, "What is this?" And you're going to have to tell them what it is. And if you don't have proof, they can just assume and presume that that's a gift. You have to prove otherwise. So they can find out what all these gifts are.
Would you just share for our viewers that it's hard to trick the U.S. government?
Oh, sure. Well, yeah, like I say, they're not stupid, and so they have this rule that they'll look back at all your assets, and if you don't counter and prove otherwise, they can say this is a gift.
Right.
So I mean, I've had them do that before. The other thing to understand too, because I had someone in the office the other day. we were talking about gifts, and they said, well, if they gift this money to me, the daughter, well, what if I spend it? How are they going to get it? I said, well, they don't come and get it. They don't come and get anything. They just say you're not eligible.
Right.
So here's your mom or dad. They're in the nursing home. They're out of money and they're not eligible.
Right.
So they don't come and get anything.
Right. Which means you have to come and get your parents.
Right. Right.
And bring them back home.
Right. Right.
That's how they do it.
So let me explain how the transfer rule works. So let's just say someone spends down below $2,000.
Right.
They apply for Medicaid, and again they look back 5 years. So let's say you gave away. I'll make a simple example since I don't have my calculator. Let's say you had given away $18,000.
Okay.
So they say, okay, that you've given away $18,000. You're going to be penalized. They divide by an official private pay rate. It's approximately $6,000.
Okay.
So 18 divided by 6,000 is 3.
Right.
So you're ineligible for 3 months. Now, the 3 months, logically, you might think it started when you made the gift, but it doesn't. The way Medicaid penalizes it, the 3-month penalty does not start until two things happen. One, you've applied for Medicaid, and two, you would be otherwise eligible. In other words, you've spent down below $2,000 and met all the other criteria. So now, from that date, so let's just say that date is September 1st, 2018. You're below $2,000, you apply. Now you're ineligible for September, October, November.
3 months.
3 months going forward. Well, what's the problem? Well, the problem is you don't have any money.
Right.
So,
Right.
And you could do that example with bigger numbers.
Right.
So if you got gifts in the last 5 years, you're going to have a problem. And again, they don't come and get anything. Now you got to pay. Also, again, we kind of need our calculators, but so the Medicaid penalty rate, I'm just going to say it's because it's approximately $6,000. Their penalty rate for this calculating is $6,000. What's the nursing home cost? It costs, it generally costs more than that. So let's just say it costs $9,000. So you might say, maybe you gave that $8,000 to your daughter. So your daughter might say, well, I'll just use the $18,000 and I'll pay. Well, if you do the math, the $18,000 won't cover the 3 months of the nursing home, which costs $9,000 a month.
Right.
And that's pretty much the way it always is. Now you can fix that. Well, one, if you go to an elder law attorney, they're going to know that simple strategy doesn't work.
Right.
And if you can return the gift, then that does solve the problem. So before you go in, and when people come in and they're ready to apply for Medicaid, we review everything, and if we see these problems, we try to fix them up. So if you can return the gift, that undoes the penalty.
Okay.
So, and it's really kind of the worst case scenario. If you're out of money and you apply for Medicaid and you have these gifts that can't be returned, you got a problem. It's really the worst thing that can happen. You have your loved one in a nursing home being getting paid, they could kick them out. Now there are some protections in the Nursing Reform Act. They can't literally kick people out on the street.
Right. However,
but it's still, you don't want your mom or dad or spouse in that situation. So it's just, and there have been cases where they can potentially sue the children who maybe were involved in gifting that money. They can do that.
And again, it creates stress on the family.
Well, sure, yeah. It's
at
not
the
a good
point your
situation.
children are saying, I'm not going to give this money back, this is mine, and you're saying you have to because I need it.
Yeah. And I tell you, the hardest situation, a lot of times people give a grandchild a car or some money for college. You can't ask your 20-year-old grandchild to return that. So
no, you can't.
But if people come to me ahead of time, there's usually some type of planning we do to fix that. I can't say that for every case, but you don't want to just. And one of the things that happens is a lot of times nursing homes, they will tell people, we'll handle the Medicaid application for you. And if they haven't reviewed all that and tried to fix it up, you're going to have a problem. So.
Jeez. Yeah. So if a person, what is the first step in determining whether a person is heading toward Medicaid? If I took a snapshot, click right now, and a couple has a home that is paid for, and they have maybe just $500,000, 500,000 in personal savings and IRAs and that. to them it looks good, and their age is 80. 80. In her family, diabetes is in the family, in his family, heart problems. What do you suggest?
Well, I mean, they need to just go in and see an elder law attorney and see what kind of planning they can do. And again, the first thing is to look into insurance. And I've been told by agents, you don't have to be in perfect health, but
No.
you know, and it depends. I mean, if you have early stages of dementia, you're not going to get anything. I've been
No.
told with heart disease, if you can do well for 2 years or so, you might be okay. But just get at least look into insurance, and maybe only get a year's worth of coverage.
Yeah.
You can get a year's worth of coverage, and then also do some legal planning, and we do want to get to that in a minute. And before I forget, let me talk about I didn't talk about the income rules.
Okay.
Ohio now we've had for a couple of years, an income rule that if your income is above a certain level, you're not eligible.
Period.
If you're $1 above it. But there's an easy fix for it. It seems kind of odd, but it's necessary because there's so many people who are a little bit above that. But what they do is you're allowed to set up, and this is in the law, it's not
Okay.
a loophole. The Medicaid law allows you to set up what's called a qualified income trust. So let's say
Right.
your income is above the level. What you do is you set up this trust, you pay it in every month, and then you pay the nursing home, and that allows you to be eligible.
Okay.
Yeah. And now let me talk about the income rules in general. So let's say, for example, a husband, I pick on husbands because kind of the more likely scenario, right? But the husband goes into the nursing home, and you get to the point where they're on Medicaid.
Okay.
So all their income has to go to the nursing home. Now, if you're the spouse
All
at
of
home, well,
Okay.
there's a certain deductions you're allowed. There's a kind of a calculation. You're allowed to deduct your, medical insurance premiums.
Okay,
There's a
okay.
$50 personal allowance. But in general, all your income has to go. Now, if you're the spouse at home, you keep all your income.
Okay.
Now, of course, if you have a high-income spouse in nursing home, that's a problem.
Yeah.
There is, I don't like to talk about it too much because it's not that great, but there's a formula called the monthly income allowance where the spouse at home may be allowed to keep part of that income of the spouse in the nursing home.
Okay.
But the formula is it's just calculated to give them a minimum amount. It's not based on their budget.
Okay.
In my experience, it's every once in a while someone asks me to calculate it, and I do, but it's not. It doesn't make you feel very good.
Right. Well, it wouldn't based on the numbers.
Right.
So, let me just understand. If she's never worked, what happens?
Well, if it's the low income spouse at home, then they get whatever income they get, which is lower. And well, they're just not going to get that the other
Okay.
spouse's income, which is why it's so important to protect the assets. Because if we can
Okay,
protect
okay.
assets for the spouse at home, they at least have that.
Right.
Right,
Right.
right,
Right.
right.
So how does that happen? What are the steps for?
In terms of so let's talk about planning. So how do
Yeah.
we plan? Again, if you're healthy and you're planning ahead of time, insurance. Your plan should not be, I'm going to stay at home and my daughter's going to take care of me. I know.
Why do people believe this? Is
Yeah.
it just a?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know. Haven't seen it
So
happen.
it's not a good plan, and again, I don't ever want to encourage people. At least maybe you'll do that for a while, but that shouldn't be your plan. The third step is to do some type of legal planning or estate planning, where what we do, I'll give you some examples. We utilize the things that are available in the law for protecting assets. So one of the simplest things is we call it a spend down plan.
Okay.
So let's say you're a single person. If you don't do anything, you just pay the nursing home bill. So you could just
Okay.
do that, which if you did absolutely nothing, what's going to happen is you're going to pass away and there's no money to bury you.
Right,
So,
right.
So one of the
Worst
simple
case, yeah.
things is simply doing prepaid funeral plan, cemetery plot if you want that, and so on. So that's a very kind of a no-brainer.
Are
We
you
do that.
allowed as a single person to have a car? Because I know with a spouse, the spouse can buy a car.
And that changed a little bit recently. Ohio used to have, shows why it's important to account for inflation.
Yes.
Ohio's rule used to be a single person could have a car worth $4,500.
Yes.
That was never adjusted for inflation.
Never.
But now it's different. So you can have one car.
Okay.
And that might be helpful. Sometimes you have maybe the person has a handicap van or something, and then their kids can pick them up with that. But a lot of times it's not practical. So, but you can't have one car. So as a single person, and of course the spouse at home can have a car too. But look, my example is going to be a single person here. So you could do that. You can buy a burial plot, and oddly enough, the the rule's pretty broad, but you can buy a plot for yourself, your spouse, your children, your parents, and your brothers and sisters. So if you wanted to, you could buy a lot of plots. But I think that's the old idea of having a family cemetery plot. So cemetery plots, if you have any kind of expenses, you might want to prepay some things, like I don't know, a TV for your room or something like that. Personal things. If you have any medical expenses aren't covered, like sometimes eyeglasses aren't covered, so things like that, you might go out and buy that. Just some, maybe a nice chair, some things for the person's room in the nursing home. So those are some things you can do. Now, for a married couple, there's probably more things you can do. For the spouse at home, remember that home's exempt. So you might want to, instead of waiting until you spend all your money and you need a new roof 5 years later, maybe you put on a new roof, maybe you need a new furnace. Some people like to fix up the house. Maybe you fix up your kitchen, so you can fix up the house.
And that would you would not be penalized for that.
Correct. That's a proper spend down. And also, certainly, if you have any debt, pay that off. So if I did the calculation and let's just say you have to spend down $70,000.
Right.
Well, if you got a $30,000 mortgage or other debt, well, you pay that off.
Right.
Now, an important point on that is, remember I said for a married couple, they calculate this resource allowance for the community spouse, and it's half what you have valued on the first date you enter a nursing home. And I should also add, that assumes you're there for 30 days at least.
Okay.
If you're there 20 days and go home, it doesn't count.
Okay.
So if we have that snapshot date and you're there more than 30 days, that's when you do the spend down. You don't want to do it before.
Okay.
So if nobody's gone to a nursing home, you don't spend down.
Right.
So,
right. There would be no need.
That seems obvious, but I have to say that because sometimes people don't realize that.
Okay.
But yeah, certainly you pay off any debt. Again, fix up the house. So those are pretty common spend down things. Or you might buy a new car.
For the spouse?
Yeah, my last example, I was talking about a married couple.
Okay,
right?
all right.
So yeah, so the spouse might buy a new car.
Okay,
So, now,
and
of
that
course,
would not disqualify.
correct. Right,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
So-
there's a little bit of latitude, but that $126,000 on the spousal side that they're allowed, that's it?
Yeah, that's the maximum. It's
Right.
half up to a maximum
Right,
of
up to
approximately
one-
$126,000.
Right, right. And a spouse is supposed to live on that?
Well, yeah, right.
Whew,
Yeah.
give me some options.
So, well, okay, so we talked about spend down plan. A couple other options, if you're planning ahead, so let's say you can't get insurance, or maybe you get insurance, but it's just maybe a 1 or 2 year policy. You could set up what I call an irrevocable Medicaid trust. Some people call it irrevocable income only trust. Now it's a thing, I could talk about trust all day, but there's hundreds of different types of trust. But this is a trust that has to be drafted specifically with knowledge of Medicaid and state law, because the states are all different.
Okay.
I describe the trust with people as you can't have your cake and eat it too. We can't say, well, we have this trust here, it's exempt from Medicaid,
But then I'm
but
gonna
I
do
can
this.
take
Yeah.
money out anytime I want. It's irrevocable, so the parent, whoever is, which is the grantor creating the trust, you do not have free access to that. Now you
That
can.
is hard for people.
Well, it is. You're between a rock and a hard
Right,
place. Do you want to
right.
protect money, but you're losing some access? Now you can reserve the income. So whatever income you're
Right.
getting, whatever income producing property, income, dividends or rental income maybe, you can get the income. But you can't really use the principal. Also, different than other trusts, you can't be your own trustee. It has to be someone else. Usually people pick a family member. You could pick
Okay.
a bank, but you can't be your own trustee. Now also, remember we talked about the 5-year look back.
Right.
So you are basically giving money away, so you have to get by 5 years.
And that is
So-
from the date, from inception?
The date
or-
of creating the trust and
Right.
putting everything in, or
Okay,
I say
so
everything.
you're counting back
Right.
calendar
Right.
years.
So you have to be reasonably healthy where you think you have a good chance of getting through 5 years. And also I said everything, I probably shouldn't have said that. So when I have people that do these, you don't want to put every penny you have in there. So I tell people, figure out what dollar amount you still want to have in your own pocket.
Okay.
And that's kind of a personal decision. Now, but of course, you don't want to set up and just put in $10,000 in there.
Right.
It has to be enough to make it worthwhile.
Right.
So that's kind of a judgment call.
So, just for my clarity here, if you have a spouse, and I'm looking at what happens to the spouse during this period, and you set up this irrevocable trust, is the spouse the trustee or what?
No, for a married couple, neither of them can be the trustee. It has to be someone
so
else.
it's somebody else, which means that for you to move money out of that trust based on 5 years, that's a long time.
Well, yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're putting
yeah.
everything in this
Right.
instrument.
Yeah.
If you want to take money out, you really can't
No,
do
no,
that
you can't.
without the trustee.
Right. Well, the trustee can't do it. The trustee isn't allowed to give you money either, except the income, which again is why you don't put everything in there. The way to kind of, and again, this isn't for everybody. I'm not saying everybody should go do it, but the way to kind of ameliorate the disadvantages is you don't put everything in there. You keep
Okay.
out something that you feel comfortable. I want 50,000 or 80,000 is still in my name.
Okay.
So you'll do
Now,
that.
is that the retention of that 50,000? Does that count against your?
Oh yes, yeah, it's
so-
50,000. So yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, Mike.
I should mention too briefly, not briefly, but so we're talking a little bit about there's kind of 4 levels of planning. We're really just focusing on planning for protecting the estate and becoming
Right.
Medicaid eligible. We also have to think about Medicaid has what's called a estate recovery program. After you pass away, Medicaid has a claim against your estate to get paid back. The reason I just thought this, the irrevocable trust is exempt from that claim also.
Okay.
So,
that's a beautiful vehicle if you follow the rules.
well, again, it's not
And
for everybody, but
it's
yeah.
not for- and if you
yeah.
have the assets at risk, correct? So a person who is, well, the purpose of Medicaid is for the poor anyway.
Well, that's kind
yeah.
of what,
Is that
I don't know if
not?
I'd say that. That's kind of what you
Okay,
hear.
then I'll say the
Medicaid,
indigent.
we're talking here about nursing homes. Medicaid, all kinds of programs.
Right, they
There's
do.
hundreds of programs, which
They
are
do.
good programs, but we're focusing on the nursing
Right,
homes.
which
and,
is
yeah.
a lot of that budget is going to
Oh,
that.
yeah, it's a-
I mean, when you look at where are the dollars going for Medicaid, it's going to the nursing homes.
Sure.
That's where
Oh,
it's
yeah.
going.
Yeah.
So if you set up a trust and you follow the rules, how much can you exempt?
Well, I mean, I don't know if there's I don't know,
I mean,
give you
is there a
numerical
dollar
answer.
amount?
No, I mean, if you set up an irrevocable trust ahead of time when you're healthy, you could put as much as you want in there. So assuming again, you got to get beyond the 5 years.
Right,
So,
right,
yeah.
right. And if you don't, or if you violate, then the clock starts again?
Well, the idea would be if you set up, you decide on day one how much you want to put in.
Okay.
You don't want to 2 years later put more in because that starts another 5 years,
Right,
at least
right.
for that
So
amount.
you do a lump sum deposit
Right.
into that trust.
Right.
From aggregates, from investments and cash value insurance?
Yeah, or real estate,
Real
whatever you
estate,
want.
whatever you
And
dump
pretty much
into the
any-
trust.
Well, the only restriction is IRAs.
Okay.
Because if when you take money out of an IRA, you have to pay income tax on it.
Exactly.
And putting in an irrevocable trust is interpreted as taking money out of there. So you really
Okay.
can't put, well, I won't say you can't. You can put money in there, they're just a tax disadvantage. Now, so I have people that do that because, again, you're between a rock and a hard place. So
Right.
do we want to protect this money and pay a little tax now, or do we just leave it there and then what I call the nursing home tax is 100%? So you
Right.
could lose all of it. So,
Right.
yeah.
Oh,
Let me mention another planning thing, annuities. And this has been kind of a roller coaster starting in the
it
90s.
surely has.
Where annuities were used in planning purposes, then the
Right.
states fought them, and then you couldn't do them for a while. But where we are now, and it's been since 2006 or 2005 approximately, Congress passed a specific statute and says, okay, if you set up an annuity, here's how you do it, and then if you do it this way, then it is
It's
exempt.
okay.
So let me give an example. So
Okay, let me definitionally,
okay.
just so that you viewers are clear, an annuity is an insurance contract. You cannot get an annuity through any other type of a venue. It is a specific insurance contract that guarantees you for a deposit X number of dollars a month, depending upon your options. It's a very simple way. A Social Security is reminiscent of an annuity. You put money in and you reached a certain age threshold and you started getting money out. So that's what Attorney Millonig is talking about.
now, some annuities, of course, are deferred annuities.
Right.
So that's just like an account or investment. So for under Medicaid rules, if you have a deferred annuity and you're getting an account statement, you have a right to take it out. So that, that's countable.
Right.
But what we're talking about is what we call an immediate annuity, where it's
Right.
annuitized. You don't have, there's no account balance anymore.
Right.
You're getting a payment. So I'll just give an example. So let's say we have a married couple and they have $200,000, and so they have to spend down, I'm just making this simple, $100,000.
Yeah.
So they could spend down using some other strategies, or the community spouse could go out and buy an immediate annuity in the name of the community spouse, and it's payable to them. So they go out and they spend $100,000 on an annuity. That's their spend down.
Right.
And then the spouse in the nursing home would be eligible. The community spouse
Would
gets
get
that
that
annuity every month. It's not an asset because there's no balance anymore.
Right.
Now the trade-off is the Medicaid rules say you have to set up for the life expectancy of that spouse. So if
Right.
that, under Medicaid's rules, if their life expectancy is 8 years, it has to be an 8-year annuity.
Okay.
And if you pass away before then, what they require you to do is the state has to be the beneficiary.
Right.
So
Okay.
now the annuity has an owner, which would be the spouse.
Right.
And an annuitant, which would be the, again, community spouse. And then beneficiary is if you die before it's all paid out, that's who gets what's left.
Right.
So you have to name the state, not necessarily for the whole amount, but to get reimbursed for whatever the
Right,
state paid.
right.
So there's a little risk there, but if you live through the life period, then you've gotten all your money back.
Well, see,
So-
that is a beautiful strategy.
It's again, I don't like to.
I know you don't, as an
I know a
attorney.
lot of times I get the
I
reaction,
mean, yeah.
but these aren't, there are situations where that isn't good for people
Right,
for whatever
right,
reason.
right.
But it can be, but now it's not really, if you're single, it's not a good strategy.
No, because
it doesn't do you any good, because if you're single, the money just goes to the nursing
Right,
home.
right.
So, and
Get
sometimes
married.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Sometimes I've heard that too. So sometimes single people go in and they go, "Boy, we don't get all these breaks."
Yeah,
but
get
that is true.
married.
Just
But-
like the tax code.
I know. Give us your phone number and website. Time's up.
Sure. It's 937-438-3977, and the website where I have a lot of this information. It's just my name. It's www.michaelmillonig.com. So.
Okay. Again, another great show on protecting your assets from nursing home seizure. Current. He did a previous show some while back, maybe 3-4 years ago, but this is fresh information. Want you to take advantage of what he shared, and feel free to talk to him, visit the website. And again, we're in such difficult times. I can't even say much because it's that challenging. But our responsibility is to give you the information to empower you to change an outcome. Because if you don't have the information, you won't know what moves to make. And the second thing is seek the advice of a certified estate planning attorney, such as Michael Millonig. Why? Because it's just too complicated for you to do it on your own. I'm no exception. I see him as well. So on today's segment of The Power of Money, I want to again thank my guest, Michael J. Millonig. You have his phone number and his website. Please consult. And in closing out, I wish you only the very best. God bless you and peace be with you. Take care.